Talking about these people who worked the system, which was a lot of women who talk about their life. Having a job working for the government was working the system. You want me to tell you how I can prove that? Because they took your job. See, if you are a seamstress, you can sew. If you are a hooker, if you're a hooker, you can sell your body, even if the government shuts down.
Prostitution is the
oldest profession. There are professions that the government simply cannot shut down. But all of you ladies who were bragging about your position in society, who are on the outside looking in now, you really need to step up and help the next generation and say, I bet on the system and lost.
Recently, many of us came across a story involving Marvin Winans and an incident that took place at his church in Detroit. During the service, a woman walked up the aisle to give an offering of around $200 instead of gratitude. However, she was met with sharp criticism from Marvin Winans. He scolded her in front of the congregation, saying things like, "You're not listening. That's not what I told you to do." The woman, clearly embarrassed, tried to explain that she didn't have the additional $8 he'd requested, but promised she would bring it later. Despite her explanation, she was still spoken to harshly. Interestingly, Corey Holcomb, who often faces backlash for his outspoken and sometimes controversial remarks about women, decided to share his thoughts on the situation.
Our church's focus is not on building families. It's about keeping women single, comfortable, independent. I said what I said. Just look at the numbers. The church is 70 to 80% single women. Yet the pastor want to sell these women this fairy tale, telling them that your Boaz is coming. Keep waiting, knowing good and well that there isn't any single men in the congregation. And that's low-key manipulation. Because the men aren't flocking to the churches because the churches are catered to women. The sermons shame men and pamper women. The programs be women brunches, women conferences, women's night. The churches know who paid the tithes. It's the women.
I want to share my thoughts on this again because it's a conversation worth revisiting. When you see individuals who are completely transparent about how they live, like Corey Holcomb and others, it's no surprise that men tend to connect with them. People naturally gravitate toward voices that reflect their own experiences or perspectives. But even among men who are known for offering the toughest critiques of women, there's a shared sense of disapproval toward what's happening with some black pastors and their churches today. And there's a clear reason for that. As one young woman insightfully observed, many of today's churches seem to be keeping women single, and it's no coincidence. This isn't just an unfortunate byproduct of modern relationships. It's a pattern that's been nurtured and sustained because it benefits those in power. These environments often thrive on women's unwavering loyalty, faith, and generosity, qualities that, when misused, become tools for manipulation rather than expressions of faith. If you take a moment to look closely, the pattern becomes undeniable. In countless congregations across the country, the majority of the faithful givers are women. They are the ones filling the pews every Sunday, volunteering for church events, organizing fundraisers, and contributing sacrificially to the offering plate. But what stands out isn't just their devotion, it's the absence of men in equal numbers. There's a reason for that. Many men, especially those who value self-respect and equality, simply won't tolerate being spoken to with condescension or authority in the way some pastors address women. When a preacher crosses the line and disrespects a man, the response is often immediate and direct: confrontation, departure, or refusal to engage. Men, in general, tend to draw a clear boundary around respect. Women, on the other hand, have been conditioned, often through generations of religious teachings, to remain patient, obedient, and forgiving, even when mistreated. That's where the imbalance begins to show. Some pastors, knowingly or not, have learned to exploit that difference. They subtly create environments where women are encouraged to stay single, wrapped in the belief that waiting endlessly for God's chosen man is a form of holiness. Sermons directed at women often sound familiar. "He's not on your level," or "wait for the man God sends you." These phrases sound spiritual, but in reality, they reinforce dependence on the pastor, the church, and the idea that fulfillment can only come through submission to an institution rather than through personal growth or discernment. What's often missing from these messages is any real emphasis on accountability, independence, or emotional wisdom. Rarely do we hear a sermon encouraging women to build financial stability, self-confidence, or a healthy sense of self-worth outside of romantic or spiritual dependency. The focus instead remains on obedience and endurance. The goal, whether intended or not, isn't spiritual enlightenment, it's control, and the consequences of that control run deep. The more women remain emotionally and financially dependent on their churches, the more they continue to give their time, their money, and their energy without ever questioning the imbalance. For some pastors, that dependence translates into steady income and unwavering loyalty. The church becomes less a spiritual home and more a structure of social hierarchy, where the pastor's word is treated as divine authority rather than human opinion. Sadly, the exploitation doesn't always stop at emotional or financial manipulation. Some pastors take advantage of the trust and admiration they've built, crossing personal boundaries for their own benefit. Beyond collecting offerings, they accept special favors, free home-cooked meals, gifts, or special treatment, all under the guise of appreciation. In more troubling cases, the lines blur even further. Stories circulate, whispered in congregations and online forums, about ministers who use their influence to pursue inappropriate relationships with women who came to them seeking guidance or comfort. For these women, the betrayal cuts deep. They enter the church believing it to be a refuge, a sacred space where they can heal, grow, and be valued. Instead, some find themselves caught in a web of dependency, guilt, and confusion. They're taught that questioning leadership equals rebellion, and so they remain silent, even when they know something isn't right. That silence protects the abusers and isolates the victims. Meanwhile, these same pastors often stand at the pulpit preaching purity, discipline, and devotion, condemning the very behaviors they privately engage in. It's a painful irony that leaves many congregants spiritually wounded and mistrustful. What began as faith becomes emotional captivity, wrapped in the language of devotion. The tragedy is that many of these women are sincere, kind-hearted believers who only want to honor God. They give not out of vanity or blind obedience, but out of hope. Hope that their sacrifice will be rewarded, that their service matters, and that their faith will one day bring blessings. But when the system is built to feed on that hope, it turns sacred trust into a cycle of exploitation. And so, generation after generation, this dynamic continues. Mothers pass their devotion to daughters, who grow up believing that being overworked, underappreciated, and financially drained for the sake of the church is a form of righteousness. The cycle repeats itself, while the few who dare to question it are often labeled as rebellious or faithless. It's a quiet crisis, one that doesn't make headlines but shapes communities from within. The damage isn't just spiritual, it's social, economic, and psychological. Women lose not only their resources but their voices, their confidence, and sometimes their ability to trust both men and God. Real ministry should liberate, not confine. It should believers to think critically, live independently, and love authentically, not to live in fear of disapproval or abandonment. The message of faith should be one of balance, respect, and mutual accountability, not submission and control. The time has come to acknowledge this imbalance openly. Churches must begin to rebuild trust by creating spaces where women are treated as partners in faith, not pawns in a power structure. Pastors must be held accountable, and congregations must learn that questioning injustice within the church is not sin, it's integrity. Because at its heart, faith is not about blind obedience to men, it's about conscious obedience to truth. And any system, religious or otherwise, that thrives by silencing, isolating, or exploiting women has strayed far from the divine message it claims to represent. Inappropriate relationships, all while preaching that Jesus paid it all. Meanwhile, many women devote their time, money, and emotional energy to the church, believing they're serving a higher purpose. In reality, some are being taken advantage of. This cycle has left many men resentful toward the modern Black church, seeing how it often alienates them while keeping women bound to a system that doesn't always serve their best interests. Even Corey Holcomb, often criticized for his blunt views on women, seems to recognize the deeper issue: men exploiting vulnerable women who are already struggling, especially in a tough economy. After all, what kind of man looks at a single mother in Detroit and feels entitled to demand $200 in cash? The very idea is absurd, yet it's a pattern that's been repeating for years, with some pastors feeling completely justified in their actions. To make matters worse, several pastors actually came to Marvin Winans' defense, insisting that what he did was acceptable. But let me be clear, it wasn't. There's nothing right about speaking to anyone in our community that way. I don't care who you are or what position you hold. That kind of behavior is unacceptable. When someone steps forward to support your ministry, offering their hard-earned money, you have no right to demean them. You didn't earn that money and they did. Yet some pastors speak to their members as if they themselves are divine, as if humility no longer applies to them. The arrogance is unbelievable, and frankly, it's sad. And what's even more concerning is the growing reaction among men. Many brothers who encounter this kind of hypocrisy are becoming increasingly disillusioned. You can see it happening. Men who once identified strongly with Christianity are now shifting toward. Over the past few years, there's been a noticeable shift in the spiritual direction of many Black men. More and more are gravitating toward movements like the Hebrew Israelite faith, and it's not because they've abandoned belief in Christ. It's because they're tired of the manipulation, tired of the theatrics, and tired of the exploitation that too often masquerades as ministry in modern churches. These men aren't rejecting God. They're rejecting the hypocrisy that has been allowed to grow unchecked under His name. They're disillusioned with institutions that once offered spiritual grounding, but now feel more like political stages or financial enterprises. What was once sacred has become, in too many cases, a show, a performance built around personality rather than principle. For generations, the Black church has stood as the heart of the community. It was where movements for justice were born, where hope was preached when the world outside offered none, and where people gathered to find strength and identity. The church was not just a place of worship. It was a center of education, organization, and empowerment. But somewhere along the line, that sacred purpose began to erode. Some leaders lost sight of their calling, becoming more concerned with prestige than with purpose. The pulpit, once a platform for moral courage and social change, has in some cases turned into a stage for ego, profit, and control. When a pastor begins to demand obedience instead of encouraging understanding, something vital is lost. The church is meant to inspire respect, not fear. Leadership in faith should be about service, not domination. Yet in too many places, the dynamic has flipped. Congregations are told to submit, to give, to trust blindly, even when what they're witnessing doesn't align with the teachings they're supposed to believe in. This distortion has pushed many men away. They look around and see women being shamed for asking questions, single mothers being guilted into giving money they don't have, and preachers living lavishly off the backs of struggling members. They see hypocrisy, and they refuse to be complicit in it. So they seek spiritual truth elsewhere, in movements and communities that, despite their flaws, at least offer authenticity and a sense of dignity. The issue isn't that Black men have lost faith, it's that they've lost trust. They want a connection to God that feels real, not rehearsed. They want to see leaders who live what they preach, who care about their people more than their image, and who use their influence to uplift, not exploit. And that desire, for truth, for integrity, for a faith that feels alive again, is not rebellion. It's revival. It's the quiet revolution of a people remembering that God doesn't live in buildings or titles, but in truth, humility, and love. That's what's really happening. It's not a loss of belief. It's a search for the genuine article. And perhaps in that search, a more honest, grounded faith is being reborn. Church ceases to be a sanctuary and becomes something far more dangerous, a system built on dependence. No hardworking Black man wants to spend his day laboring under the weight of an unjust economy, only to turn around and hand over $100 to someone who speaks down to his people and manipulates the women who fill the pews. No man wants to sit in a congregation that seems to exploit the very women it claims to protect, turning faith into a financial transaction. That disconnect between the message of the gospel and the actions of those preaching it is exactly what's driving men away. And it's not just about money. It's about dignity. It's about seeing the women of our community, our mothers, sisters, and daughters, treated as emotional and financial resources rather than as spiritual equals. Too often, pastors use sermons to keep women compliant, preaching patience when they should be teaching empowerment, discouraging critical thought under the guise of obedience, and convincing them that their worth is tied to how much they give or how loyal they remain. By enabling this kind of behavior, many churches are setting women up for failure, trapping them in cycles of dependence where loyalty is rewarded not with love or support, but with exploitation. It's a quiet, systematic erosion of trust, and it has real consequences. Women who give everything to their church often end up emotionally drained, financially burdened, and spiritually disillusioned. Meanwhile, the leaders who perpetuate this pattern face little to no accountability. This problem isn't new. It's been brewing since at least the 1970s and 1980s, when the rise of televangelism blurred the line between ministry and marketing. The church became a brand. Pastors became celebrities. Instead of shepherds guiding their flocks, some became businessmen running spiritual enterprises. The scandals that followed, financial fraud, sexual misconduct, and moral hypocrisy, weren't isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a deeper sickness, a culture that values charisma over character and loyalty over integrity. And yet, the cycle continues. Congregants keep giving their money, time, and trust to those who've proven they don't deserve it. Why? Because faith is powerful. Because hope is hard to let go of. Because for many, the church remains one of the few places where they feel seen and heard, even if that sense of belonging sometimes comes at a cost. But more and more people, especially men, are beginning to question the cost. They're asking why the same system that once uplifted the community now seems to profit from its pain. They're asking why the same preachers who claim to speak for God seem more concerned with personal gain than public good. And when they don't find honest answers in the church, they look elsewhere. That's why movements like the Hebrew Israelites and others that emphasize identity, discipline, and direct accountability are becoming more appealing. These groups may not be perfect, but they offer something many feel the church has lost: authenticity. So, credit where it's due. Corey Holcomb was right to call this out. He may not always say things in the gentlest way, but sometimes the truth needs to be said plainly. Many Black men recognize exactly what's happening, and they're done pretending it's okay. The issue isn't about hating the church. It's about demanding better from it. The Black church has always been more than a religious institution. It's been a cultural heartbeat, a safe haven, and a force for social change. But for it to keep that role, it has to evolve. It has to remember that leadership means service, not status. It has to stop silencing dissent and start listening to the people it claims to serve. Accountability isn't betrayal. It's love in action. And love for the community means standing up to anyone, even a pastor, who uses faith as a weapon instead of a bridge. The time for silence is over. For too long, exploitation has been disguised as devotion, and manipulation has worn the mask of ministry. But now, the truth is being spoken out loud, in barbershops, online platforms, podcasts, and gatherings of men and women who are tired of being used in the name of God. This issue runs deep, but so does our resilience. The Black community has always found ways to rise above injustice, even when it came from within. And as more people speak up, more begin to see the difference between genuine spirituality and religious exploitation. Change won't happen overnight, but it will happen because people are waking up, reclaiming their faith, and demanding integrity from those who lead them. It's long past time for that. The community deserves truth, transparency, and leadership rooted in humility, not hierarchy. Real faith doesn't exploit, it empowers. And until that principle guides every pulpit, the exodus will continue, not away from God, but away from those who have misrepresented Him.